Good evening, Zachariah Jackson, Bassett News. Again, we're out interviewing people and those that do work in the community and helpmates to the growth of communities and everything around New Jersey. And in fact, around the country. You've seen me many different states. Today I'm interviewing Leah Jackson. Now there's a reason why you just see me. She chose not to be on camera because of some religious things. She's purifying herself.
Sure, I could explain that if you want.
Okay, go ahead. Yes, I would like
Sure. Hello, everyone. You hear me by voice only, but that's okay. I'm no stranger to the camera, but I am in right now my year of what we call, I guess you could say, a rebirth. So okay. I am a practicing now priest in the tradition of Yoruba or Santeria.
All right.
And so on October 11th, I was officially initiated.
Okay.
And part of that initiation is a year of white, wearing white. There's a lot of other things, but mostly it's taking time inward and also to kind of protect myself also from the elements and the energies and everything else. And that also includes being photographed or videotaped. But just so you know, for the folks at home, I love to be on camera.
Wow.
I
know you
I'm a performer.
You can't eat out either. No eating out.
I cannot. Yeah, I don't eat out. There's a lot of different, regulations that.
For 1 year.
For 1 year and 7 days.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
So after October.
So you have 19th. To cook for yourself. Is there any special? Is there a special diet?
No, I cook for myself, or if I do take anything, I have my own items that I eat from and everything else. And that's really to protect myself and also to kind of, like I said, stay on that humility. Okay. Because part of kind of rebirthing and becoming a new person is getting back to who you are and really learning who you are. Sure. So this year is all about that.
And let me ask you this right here, and I'm sure the folks at home would like to know, why do you need to be a new person? Is there...
For the last 20 years that I even learned about the Yoruba tradition, religion-wise, when I was in college at Rutgers University. My professor...
In Newark, Canada?
I was at New Brunswick.
I
was a Douglas student. And my professor was Dr. Carla Jackson Brewer, and she was going through her initiation process at the time and taught Intro to Africana Studies, and part of that was the curriculum was teaching us about the Orisha and about Yoruba and about what that religion was in relation to the history of folks on the continent and then the Middle Passage and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of connectivity in terms of culture, religion, and language. So when I first heard about the Orisha, it just like hit something in my head, and was always on a path to learn more and more. And then about 12 years ago, I met someone here in New Jersey that was a practicing priest, and she took me on as a godchild, and then everything kind of, started evolving from there. And so why do I need to be a new person? I think that it's important to get to a point in your life where you can still grow. Okay. So it's another part of the journey for me in my life, and it's another part of my evolution. So it's important for me to recognize that I have a destiny. And this is part of walking into that destiny.
So will you ever practice any other religion?
I was born to a family that didn't necessarily go to church every Sunday in terms of my immediate family, but I was Christian. I was christened in the Baptist church. And then as a child, I had a minister that lived right behind us here in New Jersey, Reverend Dr. Marion Franklin of First Baptist Church of Vauxhall. And I said I wanted to start going to church, and I went by myself. I was 10, and they sent the church bus around to get me for Sunday school, and I went there for many years. My mother started attending, and then, and my grandmother both on both sides, Methodist on my mother's side and Baptist on my
African
father's side.
Methodist or just Methodist?
No, Methodist.
Okay.
Methodist.
Because we have to be
yes,
sure. You know,
yes. No, but Baptist on my father's side. So I'm very familiar with the Baptist tradition and the Baptist denomination of the Christian faith, and then learned a lot about Islam through my best friend. So I would go to the masjid. I would go to Arabic school with her because we were best friends. So growing up, you go to somebody's house and you just end up doing whatever they're doing. So I learned a lot about different religions, and I became very interested. I think maybe in another life, who knows if I have, time in my life at the moment. This is incarnation, but theology is really something that I'm very interested in. Religions, I would say, world religions. So I studied Buddhism. I studied, like I said, Islam, just in terms of like history and the tenets and things like that. In terms of practice, Christianity, but Christianity left a little bit. There was something missing for me. Okay. And I found it
in the Yoruba.
Yes, I found it in Yoruba.
Yoruba. Okay. And let me ask you, how do you relate to people from that was raised on the continent of Africa, and that they don't identify with Yoruba religion?
Well, those that, so we're going to have a history lesson here, right? In the many countries in Africa, every country in Africa was colonized. Sure. So with colonization, the first thing, and as we see here, in this country, the first thing you do is you take someone's religion, you take someone's culture. Their religion is usually the base of their culture. Sure. So in order to control them and to make them, follow your lead, you take their religion and you replace it with what you can control them with. So a lot of what was done in the continent and the different countries was to basically give them Christianity or Islam and conform them to whoever the conquistadors or the conquerors or, the Dutch, the English, the Spanish, they just pillaged all the different countries in Africa. And so because some of the religion has stayed in the countries, specifically in Nigeria, Yoruba tradition as a religion, and, it's a language and a people, that as well. So it still stays. It's still there. It's just practiced a little bit differently. And the line that I work with is the one that came by way of Cuba. Okay. So the Africans that were stolen, that were taken during the Middle Passage, they had to go through all of those Caribbean islands. Sure. And when they were dropped off in all of those Caribbean islands and even in the Latin Americas, the religion kind of was able to be hidden behind Catholicism because there's a lot of similarities between the saints and the Orisha. Okay. And so because
I heard that before too.
Yeah, so because of the fact that that religion that was practiced at that time, the tradition of Orisha worship and ancestor reverence was practiced by our African ancestors that were kidnapped. What they practiced was able to kind of be kept in secret, but held. So I feel a connection because those are the ancestors that I'm from, those Africans that were taken, and I definitely have a respect for those Africans that were fortunate enough to not have left the continent and that still practice Yoruba. And there's always a respect, in terms of, like, you have different Christian faiths, you have different Islam, sects. So everybody, it's like where you land and how it evolves from there. So, by way of Cuba and the Caribbean islands, it was able to be hidden. And so those practices, a lot of the things that are practiced, and some things have evolved that aren't really anything to do with necessarily what's still practiced in Nigeria right now. Sure. But all over the world, people are, practicing. If they're not practicing Yoruba, they're practicing Voodoo, or they're practicing.
So is Voodoo?
Voodoo is very, very similar. Yes, Kandulame in Brazil. So you'll see people, in white wearing, beads, or, they may call the Orisha something different. Sure. But there's a lot of understanding between individuals. And so it's also I always have to make this, for those who don't know, this religion is monotheistic. This is not a polytheistic religion. So there is one God, and the Orisha are elements of the universe. So everything that the water, so the ocean is Yamaya, and the river Oshun, and thunder and lightning is Shango, and the wind is Oya. So instead of, and I always think that the word God is such a limited word to think about what the many facets, if you believe in a higher power or creator or anything like that. The word God is so limited. So even to say like Jesus Christ or whatever, it's just very limited to what I believe, so when I invoke or when I talk to specific things and I want specific things in my life, I like to have a name to it. As opposed to just saying, God help me. Because they'd be like, well, which one? Or what aspect of me do you want? And is it and then we get into the genderizing, like so male and female.
But you becoming a priest, right? Is that a certain rank? Is that like becoming a minister like that?
It is, I guess, to give you a correlation, it is becoming, following the path of, going into the ministry.
Okay. And they don't mind women being priests?
Absolutely not.
Is men priests also?
Yes.
Okay.
So, I mean, you can say priestess, but I don't identify.
Priestess would be women, right?
Yeah,
okay.
but I'm a priest.
Okay.
But
you can marry?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
It's hard to kind of give it to you in the correlation of what you might be familiar with. So, I'm trying not to.
Well, one day I would like to, if it's no problem with the high priest. Is there a high priest?
There is a just like we have in Christianity. Oh, absolutely not.
Because I definitely.
So you don't know, you gotta ask, right? Yes. You don't know, you ask. That is what we try to. You talk about community and everything. Right. You don't know, you ask.
I don't know.
So in terms of there, just like you have like the bishop and the yes, you have ranks, I guess you could say.
Ranks. Yeah.
So not to give you like the whole, because we have a very short period of time, right? But there's what you would call the babalaos, or those.
Yeah, I've heard that. I heard of babalaos. I heard of that. Yes. Yes.
In the practice that I follow, there are only males that are babalaos.
Okay.
But there are in existence women that are considered babalaos. Now the name always escapes me because it's not something that I talk about very openly or often. But there are then you have those elders that have been practicing for a number of years. So I'm a baby. I'm only about 33 days in, I think, today. So I'm a baby. But there's elders that have, initiated. So when you initiate, it's a big undertaking. A lot of different things go into it. A lot of it I can talk about. A lot of it I can't talk about. And there's a reason for that. And it's not mysticism or anything. It's to keep... if you really want to be on this path, if you really want to hang with this crew, there's a lot of things that you have to absolve yourself of and be open to and allow yourself to really work. I mean, for me, what led me here was my ancestors. My ancestors led me here. My ancestors have held me up. And in fact, it's really the Indian or native ancestors that have been pushing me and supporting me.
You think more so than the African?
Oh, not I know for sure. Oh, I know for sure. My grandmother. You do what's called, communicating or reading. Okay. And so my grandmother, who was a Lenni Lenape, full-blooded Lenni Lenape, Nanticoke Indian.
And where are they from?
Delaware area.
Okay, Delaware, New Jersey.
Yeah, no, Delaware.
Delaware State.
Delaware. Down there.
Right. By the Delaware bridge, right?
So Lenapes are all along the eastern region.
I heard of that.
Yeah, so from as far up as Massachusetts all the way down to even to Georgia.
To Ramapo.
Well, that's New Jersey. So yeah, I heard.
I think I interviewed a Lenape.
A Lenape?
or
And-
I was someplace where the chief was speaking or something like that. He was from Ramapo.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
there you go. Yes, that's where I
So
heard the
there's
name.
different, just like there's different
Yeah.
clans and different families.
Mhm.
My family clan is Lenni Lenape, Nanticoke, Nanticoke, and they are originally from the Delaware area, what was used, what the white folks called the Delawares,
Sure.
but that's not what we was. And so, in fact, it's those ancestors, my grandmother being like a very strong person behind the scenes now, who brought, who has brought me this far and has been with me stepping into not just priesthood, but following this tradition and working this tradition, because it's very similar to what my ancestors practiced in terms of, so that it's still being still being practiced, the elements of the earth, the elements of the energies, everything, they're familiar with it, they understand it, so it's not foreign to them. So they were like, go girl, go.
Wow. But you guys don't have a holy book that's actually
there's nothing. Okay.
Like I'm
So
a Christian,
you
we have
can-
the Bible.
So
The
you
Muslims
can say,
have their
right, the Quran. So you could say that there isn't a tangible book that we can say, but there is an oral tradition that's part of, as Africans in the diaspora, we know about the oral tradition and we know how important it is. So most of it has been kept orally, and with technology being what it is and how wonderful it is, we've been able to keep a lot of things written. So when people are studying, they can actually go to books, and because people have gone back to the continent, they've learned because they've listened and they've talked to, just like what we do, what you're doing now. You're recording a piece of history.
Sure.
And so the same thing. It's pretty much the same thing.
Well, let me ask you this. I once knew a Yoruba girl, a woman, I imagine. I guess I would say a Yoruba woman about 20 years ago. She gave me a sword. Did that mean anything?
It could. I don't know who she was and what kind of sword it was and what she gave it to you for.
It was a big long sword. I still got the sword home,
whatever she gave it to
she gave
you
me a
for.
sword, but she talked about the Babel. What do you call
the
them?
Babalao?
Yeah, she talked about them and everything.
Okay.
And I had no clue of what she was talking. She got really
She was
mad.
Nigerian, or was
No, she was American.
She was American. Okay, so did she practice in the faith?
She practiced, but then I couldn't get a grip of what it was because
she didn't explain it.
She didn't, and she was very high strung with it, and stuff. But she did give me that
the sword.
Yeah, sword, which I still have. Yeah, I still have it, a big long sword.
You have to just maybe off camera we could talk about what was the reasons that she gave it to you. And, that's probably something that's a private thing that you don't want to necessarily let the people know, because sometimes you don't want to let them know your secrets.
Okay.
Because they may use it against you. You know how that go. You know how that go.
Oh, okay.
So,
well, let me ask you this right here. In terms of your community work and things of that nature, what motivates you, and actually, what do you do?
So I have a very interesting background vocationally and educationally. So I was raised with a historian. My father was in television, as I was telling you before, for 38 years, and was probably one of the first black men to have a master's degree in 77 in speech and theater. And so I came from a household of education first. And so with from everything from my culture, a secret that no one really believes me, but I've never been outside of the continental United States. I've never traveled outside of the continent.
Oh, okay. You've never been to Africa?
I've never been to the continent. That's a plan. That's the plan. But I have had a tremendous amount of history. My father's a collector of many, many, many things. So antiquated books, slave documents, records, you name it, art, artifacts, things like that. So I grew up in a household, like I would say, is like a museum.
Okay.
And I, being one of 4 children, but really the one that was the one sitting at the floor, my father used to take me everywhere. I basically
Are you the baby?
I'm not the baby.
Okay.
But I'm the oldest on one side of the family, and I'm in the middle on the other side of the family. So you know how us black folks are. My father's first marriage, he had 2 kids.
Oh, okay.
My mother is me and my younger sister.
Mm-hmm.
But my father took me everywhere, and I was the kid that was quiet and
Mm-hmm.
absorbed. So I was sitting at the foot of Dr. John Henry Clark,
Okay.
Dr.
Right.
Ben.
Yes.
So and I was in their home. Like Dr. Clark, was like a grandfather to me. The way that I know him and the way other people know him is so different that now I understand like how unique my life has been.
Sure.
So I've just been around a lot of different people, and my father took me to plays and to behind television or behind this. He worked for ABC for so long, so I was around a lot of different people. So that was my growing up. I wanted to be an actress because my father and my mother, both of them, had lots of people who were in the show business.
Okay.
They said, "Oh hell no!"
Why?
Because you gonna be a waiter, you gonna be a waitress. That was their mentality. So they kept me from.
How did they relate acting with being a waiter and waitress?
Well, when you are an actor, an actress, and especially when you're a black person, it's a rough business, and you aren't always working in the business. You are working in other fields, and most of the time to be able to do what go on auditions and all of that stuff. So I say that in jest. But what they did encourage me to do was write. So I became a poet, a playwright at the age of 9.
Wow.
So I was writing plays, writing skits, performing, everything like that. I haven't lost my acting. I'm still an actor. Even, what I do now, it's acting in a sense because it's creative and it's spontaneous and everything. So vocationally, so I went to Rutgers University at Douglas College.
What year did you start, Rutgers?
I started in 94.
Oh, okay.
And I ended my tenure in 99, but I did not graduate with a degree at the time because I was performing, and I wrote a book. I was published by one of my friends. She started a publishing company, so I was doing everything but go to class. And but I was a creative person, so I could do a lot of different things. So I worked in the Paul Robeson Cultural Center as a program coordinator when I was in college, and then I transitioned. When I left Rutgers, I started working for Time Inc. In the publishing world.
Sure.
So I worked for Parenting Magazine. I worked for
Vibe
Magazine without a degree. I was just a little special. I used to tell my students all the time, don't do what I do. Just learn from what I did. But I was very fortunate to have a lot of different experiences. So I worked at Vibe when it first was coming out. And
yes.
I worked for Fortune Magazine, their conferences division, and they're working with the speakers. So basically, like, I was working with like Michael Dell and Steve Chase and a lot of the Fortune 500 folks, and having an opportunity to actually have a conversation with them and talk to them, and it was just amazing. And then I ended up working for a private alumni club as a program manager. So I really like doing events and things like that, coordinating events. That's part of the creative thing. But then I met someone, and we ended up getting pregnant and had my first son, and I was like, I need to get my head on straight, and I went back to what I really, really wanted to do was psychology. So initially I wanted to major in psychology, child psychology. So did you go back to school? I went back to school. I finished my degree with Human Services and Management with University of Phoenix. Go Phoenix. Yeah. I'm a Phoenix Rising. And then I was fortunate to land. I worked for a private mental health agency for a while doing parenting skills, working in the community, working with mostly people who were court-ordered to be to have parenting and anger management classes and things like that. So I was a facilitator, and then that evolved to I want to get my master's degree, but I want to pay for it. So I secured a position at New Jersey City University, where I was for 13 years as an academic advisor. I started working with students with learning disabilities. Then I transitioned to working with the general population. I was there for 13 years. And in the midst of that, I got my master's in counseling, clinical mental health. And then I studied and I went for my certification as a counselor.
Sure.
Then I transitioned to my license as associate counselor. So right now I'm in the process of getting my professional counselor,
Okay.
not certification, but my licensure as a professional counselor. But in between all of that, I've always been a community activist.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always been a rebel rouser. If you ever get any emails from me, it'll say mother, writer, advocate, and agitator.
Okay.
So I am a proud advocator. There's a really great quote from Frederick Douglass that talks about agitation, and I carry that around with me. So I did a lot of community activism, really children and families in our community, especially the African American community and Afro Latino, or but definitely our community, that one needed to see people that look like them in mental health, and then also because I am a social justice advocate as well, doing the work of bridging communities and bridging barriers and building communities and community building. So working in the city of Newark, I was a Leadership Newark Fellow, class of 2011.
Wow.
And with that opened a whole world for me because I grew up in South Orange, but being adjacent to Newark and growing up and coming from parents who were from New York City, they really kept us very sheltered, me and my sister.
Sure.
And so we really had no idea about what Newark was, and because of what...
But you knew that Newark, the people in Newark kind of reflect you, though.
Obviously.
That's like the gang is down the hill, right?
And
what is that like, though? I wouldn't know what that's like.
To be separated?
Yeah, but yes, is it like
South
to know
Orange,
that I know South Orange, and I'm sure the time you were there was less people of color there, but to know that you have like these people maybe 5 blocks from you or more that look.
I think that as a teenager, it wasn't a question in my mind. I mean, I tell people all the time, I was like, look, I was a debutante. I wasn't, and I could be very bourgeois in my thinking because that's how I was brought up.
Sure.
However, because my parents are my father's one generation, I'm one generation out of poverty. My father was one of 13.
Okay.
My grandmother had to kind of give children away to be raised by other people.
Sure.
So the reality is that you move on up. However, my parents didn't have the mentality of we're better than. It's just that we're going to raise you so that you can raise up and bring whomever along with you. So that was the type of people. My mother she's been a volunteer. She worked for HBO, and then she was in a bad car accident. And when she became healed, she became a volunteer. Was the president of the President's Council for PTA for 10 years. And in my teenage years, all I did was volunteer. Well, she volunteered me.
Sure.
So that was a part of community work, was a part of who I was. I got a scholarship for my community service as a teenager.
Sure.
So the question that you were asking in terms of your steps away from folks that look like you, and because of the narrative that was told to, so coming from New York and then being in New Jersey, my parents really didn't understand or know. They knew the history. I think my father knew more, but there wasn't an integration because they didn't have people or friends or family in that area, in Newark and everything like that. So when my eyes were open to so many avenues and so many things that I could do in the city.
In New York City.
In Newark. In the city of Newark. And I always point to the city of Newark as being like, that's where I, everything that I could possibly put my energies, my talents, my education.
Do you think that when you first went into, let's say, Newark, and you started, socializing and gaining friends, did you have the Moses syndrome?
No.
That you didn't have?
I'm not there to save nobody.
Okay.
Because I'm a therapist, so I'm gonna meet people where they are.
Sure.
That's how I think. I'm never gonna be the kind of person to say, "Oh, I'm the savior." No. I don't have all the answers.
Okay.
And so when you say the word community,
Sure.
it's communal.
Okay.
You're on the same. You're on the same. Not on the same level, but you are working together. We're
Sure.
all at different levels.
Sure.
There's things that I can learn, and there's things that I could teach.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as we could be open about that,
Sure.
there should hopefully be no problems.
I want to touch on another part of this since you did bring it up. Okay. You being raised, let's say in South Orange, right? Which at that time was definitely more of the other guy than us.
Yeah.
Right? When you started dating, how was that for you?
What do you want to know? What is the question that you were really trying to ask?
The question I'm trying to ask is that it's a black question now, and it's a question I think that needs to be asked.
Okay.
The black question I guess I want to ask you is that when you dated, right? Did you date like, all right?
Are you asking me if I dated white people?
No, I didn't ask you.
Oh, okay. I don't want to anticipate, so let me get too far. Let me listen. Hold on, let me put
I want to ask you,
listening
is this
ear.
right here? Okay. No, that ain't what I'm asking. I had a conversation a few weeks ago where we were talking, the guys was talking about sometimes black women think that they're dating down. Okay. Did you date someone that if we marginalize it together, we balance it together, that it would be considered that you dated down? Or did you date someone that came from a social economic background as you?
So, okay, I think I understand your question. As a teenager, I don't think I even had a concept of what that meant. I dated who liked me.
Mm-hmm.
So oftentimes the people that were attracted to me, but that I connected with on that social level in terms of a boyfriend, because, when you're 15, 16 years old, what is that? You go to movies, that's about it.
Sure.
Walk to the park, that's it. Most of them were from East Orange, Orange. Did I think about dating down? No, because the black young men that were in my school, they just wasn't feeling me like that.
Okay.
Now, when I graduated, it was a whole different subject, but that's a conversation probably for another episode. In terms of relationships and everything, when it comes to us, especially us young women that know our minds and are like, that's not gonna happen. So what you got next? So because I was one of those young women that I knew my mind, but that's, like I said, a conversation. When you have your relationships, round table, put me on there. But I always probably was attracted folks that maybe didn't have the same upbringing as me.
Sure.
Maybe.
So how did in terms of when you got grown and I guess.
Class conflicts.
Yeah.
Class conflicts.
Did you have class conflicts?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Was it necessary?
Was the conflict necessary?
Yes.
Well, with education and with experience comes conflict. So if you say someone's equally yoked, right? We're talking about the religion thing, right? So when someone's equally yoked, you don't have to explain certain things, and then you have different values. So what may have been on their value system, what was high on their value system, may not have been as high on my value system because of my experience. I didn't want for clothes, I didn't want for money, I didn't want for food, I didn't want for things that I maybe really didn't need.
Sure.
Because my father was able to provide that for our family. So I didn't struggle. And I think my father did that, work so damn hard so that we wouldn't live the life that he and his sisters and brothers lived. And my mother grew up in the Bronx, but she grew up in a pretty, I would say, a middle class environment. My grandfather was a musician, and he was able to also do a lot of different things. So she was raised in a 2-parent household. in a home, an apartment, but in a nice home. And she went to music and art. She went to college. So she had a certain upbringing that was more middle class. So it kind of could fit into the social economic situation of South Orange, Maplewood. But I do want to make a point about South Orange, Maplewood, and my kids are in the school system. I would completely do it all over again, because growing up in a multicultural, and I say that seriously, like not just ethnicity, but in terms of you have gay, lesbian families, you have biracial families, you have multiracial families. It's like all these different folks living in the same town, in the same neighborhoods, next door to each other, as opposed to the Portuguese live in Ironbound. Black folks live over here. The Latinos live over here. Dominicans live here. It's not like that in South Orange, Maplewood. It's very much intermixed, and because of that experience, I think I walk around in the world, and most of the friends that I have, that I've maintained, that we all grew up together, white, black, Indian, biracial, whatever, we all feel very different in this world. We work we operate very different in this world, because we grew up. It's like when you go to somebody's house and you eat their food, or you're going to their church, or you're going to their masjid, or you're going to their place of worship, or you're having lox and bagels on a Sunday with your Jewish friends, or you're going to the bar mitzvahs, you're seeing different things and you're experiencing these things, and this is you.
Sure.
And this is your understanding. So when you don't have those experiences, and you don't have that as a part of your everyday life, you become sometimes a little tunnel vision, and maybe you get a little defensive.
Sure.
And it's not because it's bad or good, it's just because of what your experience was.
Sure. Yeah.
So I absolutely made it a point, because I lived in Newark. My ex-husband and I lived in Newark. My sons were in the Newark public school system in kindergarten through, my oldest, kindergarten through third grade. And I was parent of a child with special needs. My oldest son has autism. So that part of it also was, I was right there, fighting, struggling, kicking down doors. I called myself the Dragon Lady. I was like, if I had to come up in there, and then they would think, oh, you're going to go to central office. I said, no, I'm going to go to central office. Principal, vice principal is right here. I'm on my street. So let me go and talk to you and ask you, why am I not getting X, Y, and Z for my child?
Sure.
So, and I think a lot of that also is maybe my personality, my spirit, whatever, but I think also that has to do with, I'm not afraid to sit in an environment with, a number of white people, or people who are white skinned. I'm not afraid to sit in in a place that I'm in front of white men, or where there's no intimidation.
Sure. And
it has nothing to do with being arrogant. It just has to do with I used to fight in class with people that look like you.
Sure.
And then after class, joking, haha, go over their house and watch TV. So I don't have that fear, or I don't have that intimidation about that. And that was the beauty of growing up in South Orange, Maplewood.
Wow.
That was the beauty of it. And I can tell you that I could probably speak for just about anyone that has grown up in that environment. I can't really talk about too much now, but I do know that with us really, and also I'm going to credit my parents too, because my parents had multi-ethnic friends. Okay. So I have uncles and aunts that are Jewish, that are Ashkenazi Jewish, and my father went to Yeshiva Flatbush, so I was around people, Indians, and as a part of my parents, their friends, not, I got the one, my one black friend, or my one white, no.
The real friends.
It was people that I called auntie, uncle, their children, and we played together, And that's where I think of as community, not like, we are the world type of thing, but I think of it as we can work together. Sure. If we kind of destroy this mysticism and all of the different things, especially what we're seeing now, that the pushback and everything, which I don't think is this generation that's coming up, I'm excited for this future, because they are, even when it comes to people who are different orientations, they are it's like norm for them. It's not a secret. It's
That's
not.
right.
It's not evil. It's not ugly. It's
Sure,
it's a
sure.
part of who they are. So they're the ones that are going to be making the laws, and they're the ones that are going to be, making those changes and or upholding the changes that are getting made today. So I'm very excited, and I pour that into my sons. But I am very much Afrocentric. I am very much African centered. I am very much a Black woman. But I had to stop myself. I think when I started my master's program, when I started to learn about my Lenni Lenape Indian heritage, and we were welcomed into our clan.
Wow.
Because my grandmother lost both of her parents when she was young, and at that time, when she was growing up, it wasn't cool to be Indian or Native. She used my grandma. I thought my grandma was Black because my grandmother did not identify at all. She was whiter than she could pass, if you want to say pass, because she looked like a white woman, features and everything. But my grandmother was as Black as my other grandmother, in the sense of that her culture and everything else. So when I started to learn that I knew, my coloring is light brown, so I knew that I had to be, somewhere mixed in something. But I started to identify as multi-ethnic. Now, when I talk about myself publicly, I'll say I'm a Black woman or an African American woman or whatever, but I know that I'm multi-ethnic, and I will never deny, especially since my grandmother being one of the strongest people that I've ever known, my mother's mother and my father's mother. My mother's mother I was a lot closer to in terms of experiences and everything. Her ethnicity, her heritage, I will never deny it, and I will learn more and more as I'm getting older.
Can you study their heritage? Is there a way, like with African American, we could study from 1619 to 2000?
Certainly. Certainly.
19, 2020.
Certainly. Books, research, oral tradition. So going down to Delaware when they have our gatherings, so my family's the Durhams and the Pritchetts, and so when they're family gatherings, we go and we talk to the elders. We learn about things that my grandmother didn't learn because she didn't have that connectivity because of losing her parents, being orphaned at a young age, and so now it's like that revisiting is fascinating.
Wow.
It's really fascinating. And I have, so this land really is my land, like this is where my people are really from here.
That's right.
So I will never deny
the natives.
That. Yep. Wow. I will never deny it, and always respect it. And but coming back to the circular thing is that I was raised as a Black person. My mother identifies as an African American woman. And so therefore everything that I do really comes through that lens. But I'm very much a person who works with the community. I really have probably very few groups of people that I would not connect with or try to find. And I think a lot of that has to do with the counseling piece and becoming a therapist, meeting people where they are. But I'm a social justice advocate too. So I'm always learning how to unlearn.
So you're kind of like a quilt, in other words.
I hope so.
Yeah. That's been made from many different experiences and things of that nature.
I that's a really great analogy. I never thought of it like that.
Like a quilt, and that's different. That is different.
Embroidered, right?
So, what's on the agenda for 2020 for you? What are you gonna?
So I started. I when I left NJCU to really primarily to take care of my father, who has been ill all year. I said, "All right, God, you're pushing me out of what I'm comfortable with."
When you say God, you saying you're a God.
I'm saying God, the Creator,
so
whomever.
Explain to me, okay, when you say, and when the Yoruba people say, and I'm going to say it just like that right there because I'm Christian, everybody different religions. When the Yoruba people say God.
So
like
my belief.
Yes.
Only one God.
Right.
We just all worship in different ways.
Sure.
So there's only one God. So I may be saying Olodumare, which is one of the names of God that's used in the Yoruba faith, but I didn't say Olodumare. I said God. Ancestors,
Sure.
Egun, right? My ancestors. You were pushing me out, and I know that I have been wanting to start my own practice. So I started my company, my consulting and counseling company called EBCM Outreach and Connections, which is mental health counseling primarily, so private practice,
Sure.
As well as consulting as it relates to education. So I've worked with several organizations, specifically in Newark, like the Newark College Institute, which is run out of Rutgers, Newark.
Okay.
I worked with many different organizations at NJCU in around, so also with the NAN Newark Tech World down on Hawthorne. So I'm
I was there when they was giving out water over the summer. Al Sharpton came over.
Yes, so Laura Dowdell, who's the director there. So I've been doing that. So I became an LLC as of this May. And so this year, so I have a web page that is a domain name. So hopefully within 30 days of you airing this, people can go on to Elysium Outreach and Connections and actually see information, because I'm also a poet and a writer. So I perform. I'm a part of...
After next year, October, you said October 11th?
After October 19th,
19th. I would love to have you do some poetry.
I would love it. I'm part of a collective from Brick City.
Wow.
So I'm part of a multi-ethnic collective called Brick City Collective. It's 8 of us right now. Portuguese, Latino, of different sexual orientations. And there's 8 of us. We all are educators and activists, artivists. And so I'm a part of this collective. They invited me and I jumped right in. And we do a lot of work in the community, both educating, going into the classrooms, and working within the city in different venues, performing poetry, but using our words and our voices and our work to make change, to support change, and to build community, to build bridges between the cultures that exist. You know, how many different people that live in the city of Newark, and us bridging together and using language and using art as a way to bring us together. So part of my my consulting business also is going to be incorporating that part of my my multifaceted Jane of all trades type of aspect of my life.
I just was touched by something that, and I'm sure that the audience would like to hear this here. You going back 200 years in history, in a way, into the Yoruba religion, to graph the Yoruba religion. But if we backed up 200 years, we would be 17, 19, I imagine, something like that.
Well, that would be more than that, right? Because we're in 2000.
So it would be what,
300 some odd years,
so
right?
So that'd be 200 years, would be 17 or 18. Okay. And then back in those days, the brothers and sisters that was in the Yoruba religion at that time, that was on solid ground with that religion at that time.
We're speaking on the continent.
On the continent. They more likely practice polygamy.
Yes.
How do you today?
It's still practiced.
Practice. So
it's still practiced.
What is your thoughts on polygamy?
I was
today?
raised in this country, so my experience is growing up. That wasn't a part of what I'm used to, so it's something that is not anything that I've ever felt as my personal choice comfortable with.
So, but being that you're going through your cleansing now and your purification and things of that nature, after the 19th of October of next year, will you think that you...
I'm with a mate, and I'm in a monogamous relationship, so we could just say, that's not even a question for me, but I was a member and practiced with the Sarset out of Brooklyn.
Now, what's a Sarset?
A Sarset is a Kemetic denomination that practices kind of a African spiritual system.
Okay.
And you could look them up online. The Medunater, if you're familiar with the Medunater,
No.
Metuneter, the book, is probably one of the most famous books as it relates to Kemetic culture, so ancient Egyptian. And polygamy is practiced and continues to be practiced.
Sure.
And what we talk about in terms of polygamy, in terms of what I understand of it, and as the African way, if you can afford it, even in Islam, we have that people practice polygamy. If you can afford to have more than one wife, then hey, if the wives feel that, we have that in the country, the Mormons still practice polygamy. So if you can afford it, that's what I understand it to be.
Could you tolerate it?
For me, it's not a personal choice. I would not be in a polygamous relationship because it's not something that personally I feel comfortable with, but that's me.
Okay.
That's
but
my choice.
Even after your
Absolutely.
year of purification.
I don't change. I haven't changed. I have not changed.
But shouldn't that change you?
Absolutely not.
No.
Absolutely not. That's a choice.
Oh, okay.
Just like any religion, you could be single as a Christian, and you don't have to get married. It's not mandatory.
That's right.
So same thing. It's not mandatory. Absolutely not.
But you couldn't.
Oh, I wouldn't. I'm not interested in.
Okay.
I'm not. First of all, I'm not interested in having more than one headache. Because you know how you black men are.
So you going back to the same old
And I have
hardhead.
2 sons. And I have 2 sons.
Wait a minute, you going back to the same old hardhead, even after the fact
Well,
of your
I think
purification and your change.
I'm in a monogamous relationship, and that's kind of outside of off camera. But I'm in a monogamous relationship with a man that I love that is not practicing in the religion.
He's not.
And no, he's not, and he's open. He's very, very much beginning to learn certain things and very respectful of my practice. It doesn't interfere with our relationship. I say it doesn't interfere. It's very much it's a part of our connectivity where differences can bring people together. So polygamy is not even a question that we have. It's not even a conversation that we have. I don't look down upon it,
Sure.
but it's not something that I would particularly...
Have you met any sisters, any priest-sisters that is at this point?
Not in Yoruba, but in Islam.
No, but we want to stick to me.
Yeah, no, I mean,
yet.
no. But I've met women that are in polygamous relationships. I've met queen mothers who are, married to in other African spiritual systems. And no, I mean, that's not even that's like a very small part of anything, because that has nothing to do with the practice of the religion. That's culture. So if we think about just like with Islam, you have Muslims that believe that women are supposed to be covered from, head to toe, and that's what the Quran says, and so on and so forth. But that's a cultural thing. That's a cultural thing. That's not a religion practice. So we gotta always remember, there's culture and there's religion.
So the bottom line is that you're a Black American and you're gonna have
I
that.
am a woman who is not interested in having. I would love. First of all, I'd rather if I could have a sister wife, and just have a sister wife and ain't no man. Yeah, look, the older older
now
women.
when you say have a sister wife.
That's okay. You know what? I'm gonna stop that because I'm joking and you don't know me that well. So I'm just gonna say this. I'm gonna say this.
I wasn't leading into anything. I was just trying to get an understanding of what you meant by sister wife.
So what I'm saying is that us women, we work really well together to get our households together, to get our businesses together. Not to say that our brothers, working with our brothers doesn't do that, but if you ever met any women that have lived over the age of 100, the first thing white, black, whatever, the first thing they'll tell you, how did you manage to stay this? Well, I didn't get married, or My husband died when I was 45, and I've been, so I don't know, but I was just watching the news yesterday, and they interviewed a woman who was 106, and they said, well, why? And my ex-husband's family is actually the women in his family. They have lived over 100, and
Wow.
and those women have been single for at least 40 years.
Wow.
And so there is something to be said about the difficulties of marriage between a man and a woman. But that is, like I said, when you have your round table about relationships, you call me. I'd love to be a part of that conversation.
Yeah, I would love to
Men
have
and
you
women,
next year.
Different orientations. I'll be down for it, because I mean it's worth having a dialogue, and it's definitely that's a another
Another fun.
yeah, definitely another hour. So I know we're at the third 60 minutes that and I told you, I asked you if we were gonna go longer. I told you I know I could talk. So
Well, I'm it's interesting though. I mean, I'm having a good time here, really listening to you and getting your point of view on things. I think you have a lot to give. As I say, talking with you, I could feel that quilt. My mother used to make quilts years ago, and the difference in her quilts was that she used a sewing machine to make them. She didn't do by hand. Yeah, so she could turn out maybe 10 quilts a year. You understand?
Amazing.
I had a cousin that didn't know how to use a sewing machine, and she could only turn out maybe 2. You understand what I mean?
Yes, I do. My
so
grandmother's stepmother, she used to knit. I still have a lot of her stuff.
Wow.
And so she quilted, and oh my goodness, this woman could. Oh, we still have a lot of
crochet.
her
I think go. Yeah.
Just amazing. So so the patchwork quilts, and that's history too. That's history
So
too.
yeah. So is there anything else new that's on the horizon for 2020?
So Elysium Outreach and Connections LLC .com will be up and operating after January 2020. So people could come and visit, see what I'm doing, who I'm connecting with, and I'm open. My
Now, what are you doing in that? Like, what is it?
Mental health counseling.
Mental health. Okay.
Education.
Now, when you
training.
mental health, you do. It doesn't matter culture, religion, or whatever.
No, it's non. Mine is my therapy is psychotherapy, clinical mental health, but also I do a lot of education as it relates to transition. That's my specialty. So any kind of transition change that folks are going through, whether it be young adults going into college, or people going through divorce, marriage. Just any transition, any changes. That's what my specialty. What I really enjoy working with people as they're evolving and going through those questions and doubts and nerves and whatever they're going through.
Sure.
So that's my. But I do work with. So I do networking 101 and networking 102. So I do take upon my experience of how to work a room, how to keep connections, how to maintain connections with young adults, and also young adults going into the business world, and so on and so forth.
Sure.
Stress management.
Wow, that's a big one.
I do workshops on mindfulness, using practical things like music and meditation and things like that for anyone. So in the workplace, using mindfulness to combat burnout.
Wow. That's something that really needs to be talked about. Burnout, stress, and things of that nature. I really see that you could be of a helpmate to society because a lot of people haven't really, put that in a package yet of actually talking about.
So that's what
stress.
So these are elements of where my business is growing towards, and of course incorporating my practice and what I'm learning and what I've learned, and how that translates to just everyday living and thriving, not just surviving.
Wow. Well, okay. Well, I enjoyed this hour or so conversation.
Thank you. I thank you so very much.
Yes.
for reaching out to me on Facebook.
Okay.
And, you know, normally when I get messages from people I don't know, I'm like, I put the little third, you know, my one eyebrow up, like, who is this?
Well, I think
and then
you did
check
that
out.
with me too.
Yes, oh, absolutely. I certainly did. I was like, well, who do we know in common?
Well, I sent you some videos.
You did. You had to. You know, you did. You did your due diligence, and I thank you.
Yes.
It's my pleasure to be sitting with you, and thank you for doing what you're doing, especially when it comes to using video and using that to connect us, because this is where we are, I think, the most advanced is capturing our history and also capturing our community.
Sure.
So thank you for what you're doing, and very much many blessings and continued blessings.
The ancestors give it to me.
Yes.
And I give it out.
You did. You are. You're making them proud.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Stand up very strong.
I'm trying to make them proud.
Absolutely.
I feel their presence.
Yes.
And I feel that this right here is something that's needed. Okay, now that we're at the conclusion of this, can you give your name and how they can reach you?
Sure. My name is Leah Jackson, and I can be reached through Facebook, Leah Jackson. I also have Instagram, which is right now at aleahjacksonoriginal. That is my tag name. It's private, but certainly send me a DM and let me know that you caught me here. Send me a message and let me know that, Bossa News gave you the heads up on who I am. As I said before, Elysium, Outreach and Connections, and I will give you the proper everything so you can put that on the bottom of the screen. But I also work out of Maplewood, New Jersey for the Powell Group. So I'm doing private practice right now, getting my hours.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm in the streets. I'm in them streets.
All right. Well, again, Zachariah Jackson, Bassa News. Good night.
Thank you.